also to get going, and then we'll get going. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar, The Human Cost of AI in the Workplace. The Thrive team is a talent acquisition and people development company. At our core, we believe that when people feel psychologically safe, included and valued, they don't just survive, they thrive. And through our expert search and selection, coaching and training, we help individuals and organisations build resistance, maybe sometimes too, foster connections, and thrive both personally and professionally. So we're going to get started on the webinar today, but just to introduce myself, I'm Ali Grady. I'm co-founder and director of the Thrive team, and I'm joined by Tom Cleary today, one of our associate trainers. So Tom, I don't know if you want to just give a little bit of background for yourself before we get going.
Sure, thank you, Ali. Yeah, so I was really pleased to have this topic coming up because my background is in originally education, leadership, and I moved into wellbeing due to a kind of burnout and multiple other things as well. But my specialism is in social wellbeing, so this topic is a real thing for me. So I'm hoping that we can bring a lot of stuff to it today. So really pleased to be here. Thanks, Ali.
Yeah, and just for those of you that don't know, my background's in HR, largely in large organisations, bits of chemist, the NHS, BBC, and set up the Thrive team with my husband nearly 6.5 years ago, so nearly 7 years. Yeah. Okay. Right. Should we get going, Tom?
Absolutely. Let me just get
Thank
those
you.
slides up. Seems to be having a bit of a slow day today, but they are on the way. There we go. So you said hi already, and I'll have to move into our next bit on here. So some bits today, just to sort of talk you through. So the session is being recorded. So if you want to have camera on or off, completely up to you, whatever you're most comfortable with. So just starting with that point there, I think it's a really important one that you feel comfortable today, in whatever form that might take. We've used the chat box already, but please let us know who you are, why you've joined. We'd love to hear from you throughout the session today. We want it to be interactive as much as we can do, but also no pressure on you to do that if you prefer not to. We've chosen, it's such a big topic, we've chosen to do this in a kind of interactive discussion based way between myself and Ali, but hopefully also between you as well. So again, if you want to take part, if you want to ask questions, if you want to come off mute and discuss things and ask things with us, we'd love to hear from you. But also, no pressure. If we need to host it by ourselves, that's also absolutely fine between myself and Ali. But we do like to hear from you, your thoughts, experiences, ideas. One of the benefits of Zoom is if you want to ask things anonymously as well in the chat box, you can do that too. And just very briefly, expectation setting. We know it's a massive topic. We'd love to answer every single question, big or small, today, but I'm not sure we'll be able to manage that in a short session today. But hopefully, we'll bring value to it and have you thinking about things as we go through. I'm wondering if Ali, you want to just sort of introduce this next slide a little bit, because we are very aware that it can be a challenging time for people a little bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been reading a lot about AI recently. I'm sure you all have as well. You can't escape it. And some of the headlines can be quite scary, actually. Kind of think, how far will it go? So I think, we just want you to sort of feel reassured, actually, that you're not alone in this. I guess it's why you've signed up for the webinar. A bit like the pandemic, we're kind of figuring out as we go along, aren't we? And it's such a huge topic, as Tom has said. Really, we can only manage to take small steps at a time. I think that's what we should be focusing on. And so today, it is about being present, and I'm not trying to answer all of the questions. I'm sure there'll be that you may have in your head, but if you do have questions, then please do drop them into the chat, and we'll do our best to pick them up as we go. And I know we've had sort of a couple submitted as well, so we'll get to answering those. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Ali. And thank you, Eloise. Great to see that sort of background and what's brought you here as well. And Sarah, completely get that. If you are doing things in the background, we're aware of the time of day it's going out, if you're here live, please feel free to kind of have lunch or whatever while you're doing things. Absolutely fine. No problem at all with that one there. When we were building webinar, Ali made a really, really good point, and we've included this next slide in here, this example of how much control we have in different parts of our lives. But this is a particularly relevant one when it comes to AI, depending on whether you use it, whether you don't, in what way you use it, whether it's a big part of your work, or whether you are in charge of actually implementing it within your workspace, whatever it might be. And that is these zones of control or circles of control, things that we can influence, things that we can control, and where our energy is going with that. Just very briefly thinking about the way that we have these different parts of our lives. We have things we can control, things we influence, things we might be concerned about. And I won't go through all the different ones on here, but please feel free if you're watching it later to pause and expand on these if you'd like to at all. But we were just wondering where you might put AI on this. So anything, Ali, you want to add into to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Tom. When we were building the webinar, we were talking about how much control or influence do we think we have. There's an awful lot of concern. So, yeah, just interested to hear people's thoughts. If you feel you want to speak, or if you want to drop something into the chat, to let us know which circle you think you might drop AI, the topic of AI into. Are you concerned about it? Are you influenced by it? Is your day-to-day role being influenced by it? Do you feel in control? And I guess, whilst you're thinking about that, I'll maybe share where I am. And I suppose I'm not sure I can influence it. I can maybe influence how it's used by myself within my business. I feel in control of it at the moment, but if I'm honest, some of the headlines I read, I feel concerned about it. How far will AI go? And um, I don't think it would be wrong of me to say there's probably nobody on this webinar could answer that question. So yeah, just your thoughts. Are you concerned? Do you feel in control? Do you feel that you're able to influence? If you're happy to share anything in the chat, please do.
Or come off mute if you want to prefer. Just
Yeah.
talk out loud if you prefer. To keep an eye on the mics being unmuted. Invite you on if you'd like to. But in case while you're typing, I would say that I echo Ali's thoughts very strongly on that. I'm a massive user of AI. It's expanding on a sort of daily basis. It's a massive part of my work and my kind of non-work life. And I think there's massive benefits to it, but also that fear about the future and where it goes. And with my background and my focus on social well-being, the impact of that kind of thing as well.
Thanks, Vanessa. Vanessa saying lack of knowledge and understanding makes me feel like I will get left behind. Yeah, I can appreciate why that is a concern. I can't imagine the sort of technical knowledge and skill you need to be able to have to build AI. It's definitely not something I have. So, yeah, I really understand that. Um, Heidi, thank you. And the things you can influence, you're still learning about it, using it in your work. Don't feel like you can control it. Do you use this model on a daily basis to help in both your personal and work life? Yeah, and I think that's interesting, isn't it? That certainly I'm using it in both my personal and professional life, and partly this topic of the webinar came along from a conversation I had with my sister who lives in France. She was thinking about investing a significant amount of money into a training course, and she'd previously invested quite a bit of money into a training course. So she really wanted to check that she was going to get value for money and that she wasn't just going to be sort of throwing good money after bad. And she spent a whole weekend conversing with ChatGPT and asking for their input before she came to her decision, and listening to her tell me about this. It was like she'd built up a relationship and that ChatGPT was a real person. And maybe we'll get on to a bit more about that, but it's there. It's in our lives, maybe whether we like it or not at the moment, and likely here to stay.
Absolutely. And my brother
Yeah.
and I will often refer to it as a person. I just ask chat. So I just ask, Gemini
Yeah.
something. So it is like kind of building into it. And we'll touch on that sort of para relationship building a little bit actually, which is happening with AI. And we know that things are adapting. We were talking yesterday about one of the most recent changes is that the voices that will be used within AI models have historically been ones which are very easy to recognize, like Siri, for example, as non-human. They're now using ones which will be modeled very, very cleverly on human voices and speech patterns. It'll be extremely hard, if possible at all, to recognize when it is an AI voice speaking, which brings up all sorts of things along relationship usage and other things along those lines too. Uh,
Yeah. Lindsay makes a good point, and again, I think it's something that we'll come on to explore. But using ChatGPT and other tools to make you more efficient. So you know, whilst it may feel a bit scary and all doom and gloom, actually, we need to recognise there's lots of positives in AI, and I guess perhaps where that's you might feel that you're in control if you are able to use it to benefit your work life, your personal life. Thanks, Eloise. Yeah, again, you know, using AI in a way that allows you to be more efficient at work, and yeah, thank you, rather than feeding it with negativity and adding to the ever-growing social media. Yeah,
a very
thank
good
you.
point, actually. So
Yeah.
thank you. It's lovely to see those points coming in. Hopefully, we can build on that a little bit as we go through. So thinking as we go through it, when we can't control something, try to move energy away from that. When we can, let's focus on those things, as Eloise is saying in the chat box there as well. So this is the idea behind it in terms of connection is not a nice to have. It's a really important part of what we're doing. You heard Ali earlier mention it as part of the kind of values of a Thrive team itself. I am somebody who I always use the phrase, even for a grumpy old man like me, who is a massive introvert, I score about 98% on introversion scales. I like my own company. But for all of us, we are wired as human beings to need to find some people that we can be understood by, we can share things with, we can be supported with, all of those things in there. And we know that there's been a rise in the last few years in loneliness. There was one research paper last year that 1 in 4 people in the workplace report feeling lonely, and the impact in both work but also on physical and mental well-being is huge. That idea about connection, and sometimes we talk a lot about other elements of well-being and health. We talk about things like sleep, we talk about nutrition, exercise, but we don't seem to talk as much about that social connection part, and yet it is such a powerful thing. Anything else, Ali, you want to add on to that bit there?
I was just the thing that came to mind there was the five ways to well-being, and being connected in a key part. So we know that there's lots of research around that social connection, and I think as a species, we are losing some of that. We see people attached to their phones. I'm definitely one of them at times, and if we're not careful, we will lose that social connection piece.
No, thank you. And the phone thing's interesting. We there's a great little book, I've heard of many of you, called How to Break Up with Your Phone. So talking about little things that we do because we become so reliant on tech. And working with a group recently, one of them talked about, as people working within the sort of mental health and well-being field, when supporting their colleagues, not just putting your phone down or face on it, but putting it out of sight. Because as soon as our phones are around us, they can pull us away from the people who are with us. And that brings us beautifully, thank you very much, Ali, into this next bit here about, well, actually, if connection and social well-being is so important, what does it actually look like? What does it mean in this digital age? And there's been this growing field of research about it. The book on the screen there, my somebody in my family actually a few years ago was working on this as part of his master's program, and looking at well-being in this digital age. We are continuously being shown new ways of being switched on. And this kind of quote gets used quite a lot in terms of this. The idea that the irony of the age is that we're always connected, but increasingly isolated. And there's lots of elements here with this. I'd love to know what you think about that. So do you find that in your workspace that tech is helping to connect you? Do your colleagues and yourself feel more connected? Do you feel more isolated? We've seen moves into a lot more hybrid working since COVID happened, and there's been realms around that we're having to navigate. But any thoughts from the group at all on that? What does social well-being connection look like in an era where we have so much tech and it's growing on a kind of daily basis as well? we'll keep an eye on the chat box. But again, if you want to come off mute
Mm.
and just talk, feel free to. Oh, Vanessa,
Um,
go ahead.
yeah, so I think from a mediator aspect, um, the relying on digital so much, and which obviously helps them with hybrid and remote working, definitely has an impact on those relationships and breaking down, and that level of trust can go when you don't see people so much in person. Um, so a lot of mediation that I've done seems to have gone from people having great relationships to them breaking down once they've been not seeing each other so much in the office. And so I think that's very hard for businesses really to try and manage.
No, thanks, Vanessa. That's a really good insight actually from your field of work and that relationship impact that we see on people. And yeah, we're hearing that quite a lot in different workplaces, different industries, that with remote teams, especially, or you don't see people the way that you used to, how do we know how people are doing? And sometimes we are reducing work into, well, we have to meet for this reason here, but those more casual, more human interactions maybe get displaced a bit, which then has a real impact on everything that's going on there. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it.
Heidi's made a couple of points on the chat that for her, social media makes her feel more isolated rather than connected, but Teams in the workplace is really good because colleagues are spread out all over the place. So that's a good way to help stay connected and build stronger relationships. Eloise sometimes asks her husband to hide her phone for the day, so she's not tempted to keep checking. Um, yeah, thanks. You've mentioned that word boundaries there, Louise. That's really important, isn't it? To sort of have those personal boundaries for yourself, but actually sort of stick to them as well.
No,
Yeah.
thank you both very much for that. And yeah, I use one of the group that I work with. We use Teams as a very social channel, and we will share kind of memes and gifs and things as a way of kind of like just sharing a bit of humor throughout the day. So again, it's the different tools that we have. Some of them, like social media, might produce one kind of outcome. Other things can produce different things there as well. But that being intentional with it is a huge thing. So thank you both for sharing that. Um, Anything else,
Tom,
Paddy? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and this is me reflecting on a personal sort of experience that I've had where you can still be connected to people. So you're around people and perhaps people you know very well, but actually still feel very lonely. So there's something more than just being in the room with people or being on a Teams with people, So that connection is something much deeper than that. And I suppose the point there for for businesses, for employers, for colleagues is just because you see a colleague who is in the office every day or you see them on Teams doesn't mean to say they're actually feeling connected in a way.
It's a really good point. And if we look at the groups where they rate being lonely really highly, it is sort of younger age groups who are massively connected through tech. But also something that I thought of when you were talking about that, Ali, was we often think about sort of younger people in the workforce being much more open about things like mental health and well-being. There's much less stigma about it. And yet working with a lot of universities recently and people going into the workforce, one of the biggest areas of stigma is admitting about being lonely. So we've moved massively in many cases in terms of things that used to be a huge challenge behind talking about them, and they've become easier. But loneliness has got a real sort of stickiness to it there as well. So even those people, as you say, who are very connected and may have lots of people around them still feeling isolated, but also can't talk about it either. So we've got
Mm.
quite a few things sort of going on with this as well. And we kind of build on this in terms of it's not really escapable for any of us. This is a really big thing that's going on. And as Ali and I were researching behind this, but I think both of us sort of love exploring things and researching things and looking at new things. But these are a few things that we came across. This idea that AI use at work has only doubled in the last 2 years. So there is a really rapidly growing rate of the way this is being used. And you can, so if you are feeling like there's massive changes coming weekly, there are. That's because it is actually happening at the time. Ali and I both use Zoom a lot recently, and we've both sort of seen this screen quite a few times where you use a tool on your kind of regular workday life, and it talks straight away about AI first, but also human connection. So we're kind of being shown these things, and people are being aware of both the AI rise, but also the impacts on connections. Do you want to mention this one at all, Alex? I know this one stood out for you when you found it before.
Yes.
No,
So
don't worry, if not.
I've read
It's a
so
while
many
ago. I put
headlines
you on the spot. You
recently.
had seen so many of them. No, it's absolutely fine. I can say if you prefer to.
Yeah, no, do. I'm just because the one I was thinking about, I don't think it's this. I was thinking about the government AI platform that they've called what did they call it? It's from yes, Prime Minister, wasn't it?
That's what I was thinking of. Maybe
Yeah,
I'm wrong in that case, Ali, but
yeah,
I thought it.
go
Yeah,
on.
I thought it was this one here. I could be wrong. I often am. But this idea that we have got some people thinking, well, actually, because I'm at a later stage in my career, I won't have to deal with this. But actually, there are lots of reasons why people from new starters, people who've been almost at retirement age, actually are needing to embrace these. But yes, even the way that they are personalizing, as Ali says, some of
It's
the
yeah, it's called Humphrey, isn't it?
yes.
Their AI platform, which is brilliant. Ask Humphrey, I think it's called.
And we used to have it years and years ago. This shows my age, but Ask Jeeves before Google
Yeah,
was one of the
yeah.
kind of leading search engines, and it was personalized. But now we've got not just Humphrey, we have Claude, who is one of the kind of leading ones people are using if you don't use ChatGPT or maybe both, like I do. But there are people who work full time on the personality of these models as well. How do we shape Claude or how do we shape Humphrey so the way they answer has a personality behind it as well? So both in terms of how they're shaping them and also the way it affects so many of us is a big thing here. And it's a really complex picture, and we are seeing both pros and cons. I think for some people I work with, they're very focused on the benefits and the possibilities. That's fantastic. Other people really focus on the kind of the scariness and the fear and out of control. That it is a very nuanced, complex picture. There are things to be aware of. We know that in some cases, there's quite a lot of research behind really heavy AI interaction at work can cause higher levels of being lonely. And actually, when there's roles including that, we see quite a lot of signs of negativity impact on well-being for people, whether it's to do with insomnia, to do with drinking. And most of these are based on the idea of losing something which is really critical, which going back to Vanessa's point earlier, is that meaningful connection side of things. So we do have a few of these things which are not fantastic. But on the flip side of that, if we think about the integration, and people in the chat box mentioning this, it depends on how we use things and what we are using. We know that there are some areas here where people are using AI models in a way which is actually really benefiting them. We are seeing AI models being used in therapy. We're seeing it being used for people who are lonelier in later life as well as a way of talking. And there are research cases out there where it shows a reduction in loneliness, at least in terms of compared to something more passive like just watching TV or reading a book, things like that. So there are elements here which are working well. And it is very much thinking about how we are integrating it. I'd love to again ask the group, is there anything on this note here that you'd like to expand on, or anything, Ali, from you want to add into this bit at all?
Yeah, I think I know we'll sort of come on to it, but I think thinking about the ethics around using AI, if you're making a conscious decision to use AI, then thinking about some of the ethics and policies that you use within your business. And I'll share it now, although I was going to sort of share it a bit later, just because I've mentioned it. But There's a shadow AI trend. 54% of workers would use AI without company approval. So whether we like it or not, people are using AI, and whether your business is set up for it or not, people will be using it, and that could be detrimental. So we have started to use AI within the Thrive team, and we use it in a very controlled way. We use it to sort of summarize notes from meetings. So that saves our recruiters and researchers valuable time writing up notes that can easily be summarized, which means they can focus much more on the conversation. But we do that in a controlled way because it stays within our SharePoint, essentially. That data doesn't go outside of our business, and we don't bring data into the business. So we're not giving away any of our information in that way. So that's how we are sort of controlling it at the moment. If you don't have some of those boundaries within the workplace, what trade secrets might be going out the sort of out into the ether. So I guess that's things to think about.
It's a really good point. Actually, it's very topical, what Ali's saying, because actually this week there's been a big announcement about the rise of connectors which are coming out, especially with ChatGPT, where it's making it much easier to integrate with OneDrive or Google Drive, things like that, where it's automatically turned on a lot of the time. So when companies aren't aware of it, where it's not being done intentionally as well, you can very easily have all your systems being open to AI. And therefore, if you have got things like HR things being done and people's data on there, it's causing this big ethical conversation coming up about, well, actually, should we have things turned on automatically? Probably not. Do we have people in businesses who are able to do that? So again, helping people to understand what this looks like, this evolving thing going on. Yeah, the ethics behind it. So thank you for those who sent those questions in. It's a really big one actually in here.
There's a couple of comments come on the chat as well. Eloise saying just had the thought, employers who use AI as a tool to generate material, policies, presentations could be subconsciously setting a high bar on what they expect their employees to produce in comparison. So it's an unfair comparison and could have implications further down the line if the AI generated material is the standard of which employees are expected to live up to. And that can go both ways, can't it? Because the standard could be high, in which case that might be impossible to achieve. Equally, it may be pretty low because AI does not get everything right, and so if you are setting that low standard, equally that could have implications. And actually I've got another sort of news headline here, which is perhaps sort of linking to that. Entry-level jobs plunge by a third since the launch of ChatGPT. And because so many businesses are using AI, it is eroding some of those entry-level roles. So how are businesses able to perhaps grow their own talent? How do young people leaving education get those first roles? And we'll all know from experience that actually you can't get a job without experience. So if we're not careful, if we don't take some control of how we use AI, then it could have significant effects. And
we have seen this recently with both Amazon and Duolingo, especially, who have come out very strongly talking about reducing their staff. And one headline was talking about how when Amazon goes somewhere, people often follow. This idea that actually, again, how much intention are people putting into this, and how much focus on the human connection is there as well. So thanks, Ali. Yeah.
And just to mention, Heidi, talking about the EastEnders storyline, which focused on loneliness, where a teenager had a friend who gamed, but it turned out to be AI. And I guess, I suppose it's one step on from the sort of romance scams and financial scams, where it's actually a real person at the end of it. But here we haven't even got a real person at the end of it. Yeah.
And we do see Yeah, it's great to see this coming into storylines where it does help people become, oh wow, I didn't realize that was the case. Because sometimes I think those of us who live in the kind of world of well-being and AI, we go, well, people know these things, but actually many of us don't. Like, I don't know nothing about cars, my partner does, and a car news passes me by. Whatever world we live in is very much what we tend to know about. But these ideas that we have, these human relationships forming, are really key. But there's also ones where the conversations being had can be quite negative. And there's been examples where, for example, unmoderated AI models being used to have relationship building or kind of therapy are giving quite negative advice and input through. So it's what they're saying as well. If we don't know what's going on with them, that can be a bit of an issue here too. So thank you both for sharing those. Um,
I've just, sorry, can I? I just had a thought listening to all of that about the whole sort of mental health first aiders in business, and how it's almost even more important now that with mental health, that people are encouraged, along with the training, to speak to people
Yeah.
where there are mental health issues. I did read something around, somebody had asked that they wanted to jump off a bridge, and they asked AI, and AI said, I'm sorry to hear that, and then gave 5 local bridges to jump off.
yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know whether that was an extreme, but it's like that empathy, isn't it? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's almost like if they want to hide, if they have got mental health challenges, then it's easier to hide with AI than feeling like they can speak to somebody. So it's that kind of
Yeah.
responsibility of a company to promote that, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Vanessa. And I think that I guess that just shows that, yeah, how important that human contact is, because AI was probably answering the question as was posed. So gave the answer, which obviously, if a human was responding to that, that would be the absolute opposite to the answer that they would give. Equally, I have seen some perhaps reports where AI is being used to support people's well-being and mental health positively. So again, I guess it all comes back to control, doesn't it?
Mm,
But yeah, some really good points there. Thank you.
That's a great example of that integration where
Yeah.
in some cases where it's not being done well, there's a danger increase. In other places, I've got companies I know who I work with where they are using AI really sensibly, but with that kind of moderation and human oversight. And they're talking a lot about, the future hopefully is about that integration more than anything else, but
Mm,
making sure that we have, as Sarah's put there, the people who have that real empathy, being able to oversee models which might be trained to look empathetic, but at the moment that's
mm,
not what they're actually doing. So yeah,
yeah.
there's some great points on there, and this all it's all leading towards the same sort of thing here. So whatever your kind of role is, whether you have whether you're self-employed, whether you're leading an HR team, whether you are one of the leaders there, it's that culture of balancing tech with people. So we were thinking about, well, it's all well and good to think about what these things look like, but what can we actually be aware of here when it comes to things that we're doing within our businesses or within our roles or our sort of jobs as a whole, really, here. So we do look at things like making sure that businesses and people are prioritizing social well-being, not as a nice to have, but something which is absolutely fundamental to the business succeeding. We've been seeing the impact when this doesn't work for years, but we've got to have this escalated really quickly, I think, because of AI coming into it. And Ali's mentioned the second point already, this idea that guidance on this lags behind integration. People are bringing it in, they are using it, whether or not it's being kind of discussed in advance beforehand. But actually, a lot of teams that we are aware of aren't always having things in place, or they need a bit of support with that in order to think about, well, what do we want? What will it look like? How do we integrate it? How are we making sure that the values of our business, of our teams, of our people are being enhanced by this rather than being sort of taken away from it as well?
Yeah, and I think what's key to that, Tom, is and how do we support our people, um, and make sure that they are really looked after.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's this kind of getting the employee voice in with this. And there was a lovely thing I was reading this morning, actually, which talked about having very open AI plus human workshops and conversations about, what are your things that you're excited about AI? What do you think that could bring to your role and could enhance things? And then what are you a little bit fearful of? And being really open about that. But it also brings up into this idea that have you got a psychologically safe workspace where people can voice those sort of things? They can experiment, they can try new things, which can really enhance the business and their team, but also be aware about, well, what's the fear coming from? Because there's a really kind of there's a paradox in AI. It's coming across really quickly, where people who are becoming familiar with AI are actually often enjoying their jobs more, getting more out of it, reporting being happier about it. But they're also reporting high levels of stress and fear for the future because they're not quite sure what it looks like. So we do have this paradox going on. So having teams taking account of what people are looking for and making those decisions is really key. Anything else on that, Ali, you want to pick up on at all?
I think it just sort of comes back to the human touch, doesn't it? And I think if we're talking about HR and leadership in general, then it's how do you stay human and and put your people first. So good sort of HR and sort of management practice, really. And I think what's key to that is emotional intelligence and yeah, developing that.
Absolutely. And there was something I listen to lots of podcasts. I like to hear sort of thought leaders in different industries, but also within AI and within HR. And they were talking about how since the sort of industrial revolution, we've been in an age where humans are trying to compete with machines. So it's all about output and efficiency and productivity. And we actually use words which have historically been machine words, like humans being cogs in a machine. And now we have real machines which are coming in to do some of these things. So we need to be thinking about this balance between efficiency, which obviously is key for businesses, but also that empathy bit. But so much of the research comes back to those soft human skills, things like empathy. And although some people think of this as being something you have or you don't have, there are things we can do to develop those, to understand those, to use skills in different kind of contexts and with different teams. And one person I worked with recently was convinced that he had absolutely no empathy. He'd been told that by people around him, including sort of friends and family. And on the end of the day three training, I said to him, I want you to ask the group actually how they would rate. I asked in advance if he'd be happy with this sort of thing, but how they would rate your empathy. And he was shocked by quite how high the group rated him for it. He had been there supporting somebody who couldn't speak English as a first language, when doing translations with them, helping people to reread things, helping people who were upset by different topics, which were quite challenging. And this idea about he realized that empathy was something that he had was also kind of growing was really key. And it is a massive thing that stands out recently. We'll move on to the next bit here, which is sort of building on this sort of practical strategies here as well. Um, so rituals and check-ins, we're thinking about how do we build in these sort of checkpoints, that human connection, especially when we do have maybe quite diverse or hybrid working teams? How do we make sure that people are actually doing okay? The patterns thing on there is something which I'm in two minds about. So one thing that AI is being used for with well-being and social well-being is to spot patterns of people's interactions, thinking about how often people have their cameras on, how often they're turning up to Teams meetings, things like that. So I think there's a real balancing act here because things are coming. It was tried by Teams a little while ago. It didn't work massively well, where it was that kind of are you minimizing your window or are you actually paying attention to the webinar or the meeting? And people felt very spied on and kind of not trusted with things. So it's important that we have people feeling that they are being looked after and they have that autonomy behind things. But also, if it can spot patterns, maybe we wouldn't first of all. That's something to be aware that is kind of being looked at the moment. We've mentioned the employee voice here, making sure that we have that, but also this integration about. I've seen some clients who've been using AI to write these phenomenally good newsletters to kind of share business news and to get interaction. but then making sure that a human being follows up and gives them that real kind of touch point there. Ali's mentioned about freeing up human time, so we have more time for different things in there. And then we've mentioned before this idea that we can support with these, so training people to have emotional intelligence with empathy, and the culture is such a massive part of that. Any strategy that we have is going to be kind of consumed if the culture isn't supporting that. Any thoughts on that, Ali, at all?
When I first saw this slide, Tom, it took me back to the start of the pandemic, where we were all sort of having to find our way and work out and sort of get through each day, and creating those rituals and around what a working day looked like, assuming you were working and not furloughed. Making that conscious effort to have those check-ins because we weren't able to see each other in person, so we had to do that using technology. And that how important that human connection became for all of us, and how inventive we got at being able to stay in touch with people that probably we hadn't actually stayed in touch with for quite a while, but it was a real kick up the bum to sort of make us do something different. So I think we can take a lot of our learning from the pandemic into the future. And my fear is that as as time goes by, that actually we are losing some of those things that we put into place, and that felt very important at the time. It's kind of more or less back to how we were before. So yeah.
It's such a good point, and that kind of how we were able to kind of get through that uncertainty we had and doing it again. And we've learned from that. We can bring those problem solving skills in, but also, as you say, we're great at finding ways of connecting, but we've lost a few of those so far.
Mm.
I'd love to know what the group thinks about this. Are you finding things that are working really well within your workplace, within your businesses, things that are helping you to actually embrace this big sort of change happening when AI comes in, while maintaining that human first part of that, the human connection, social well-being? Again, if you want to come off mute, you want to put things in the chat box, we'd love to hear from people. Well, Sarah, you were straight on there. Go for it.
Yeah.
I was thinking, right, time to speak, not just
Finish your
put in the
crisps now.
chat. I really, I'll tell you what, I really worry about authenticity, and I sort of wrote something in the chat about that. I'm using in my own business, I'm using AI for sure to sound out about ideas and to do research in a more efficient way, and all sorts of things. Starting to write proposals even, and so yeah, I'm using it a lot, but always really scanning, really rewriting or editing what it comes up with, not using it as a kind of, oh, there, this written a newsletter for me, away we go, let's just post that, which you could easily do. And I think what stops me from doing that is that desire to be completely authentic to my audience. And it kind of worries me a bit that people who are experimenting with AI, and maybe, this sounds really critical, but is everyone really giving that authenticity some serious thought? Because yes, it can you can save time. Yes, you can do things, in a way that approach things that you haven't expected to approach things in a certain way. But if authenticity is important to you as a consultant, as a coach, as a leader, then I think you've got to have that as a filter. You've got authentic. I suppose that's what I'm, in a very long-winded way, trying to say. We need some filters for the use of AI.
Yeah.
And one of those, for me, has got to be authenticity of message and of approach. And I don't think authenticity necessarily means, so tell people if you're using AI. I think it means, where's your human, as you've been saying about that human element, making sure that you're not taking away the human, because then you will not get the connection. People will, I think, even though it's becoming clever, more and more clever, people will find you out. And that really bothers me.
The thing that cropped up for me when you were talking about that, Sarah, was I believe, knowing you reasonably well, you're pretty clear about who you are as a person. You know,
Yeah.
you've had lots of experiences, you know your values, you live by your values. The thing that came up for me, what about younger people that perhaps aren't quite so clear about who they are? And you know, that's not necessarily age related. And you know, using AI, and they perhaps become the person that AI has created for them.
Yeah.
You know, who knows? So yeah, you're so right about those filters and boundaries, and I think being clear on why you're using it and what you want to get out of it. But you know, it's a bit like doing some maths, isn't it? You've got to know whether the answer is right or wrong, and you've got to know what the
Exactly.
calculation is to be able to get the answer. And because if you don't have that, you could be churning out anything.
For sure. And I
Yeah.
do think that is happening a bit. And I suppose that's inevitable as people are experimenting, and we should be kind about that. But at the same time, I think the skills that we all need now are changing, and those judgment skills, those kind of being self-assured in who you are and what AI can bring to you, is actually, I think, those are the things we should be really helping people to develop those skills in order that they use AI in the most effective way.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good
Thank you.
point, those filters. And it comes back to both people, but also businesses. So I know businesses who have really strong value sets and ones which are really meaningful to their teams. They do really well with this because they are integrating rather than being consumed by. So both people and businesses are clear on who they are and what they do. And again, that can be enhanced. I'm working with some schools recently where we look at value setting for young people. You know, what does life look like for you? What do you want to be? Who do you want to be? Which obviously shift over time, but it's building those things up from an early age as well, but also into businesses. I know a lot of sort of very new businesses who are starting off who are not, they aren't fully formed yet. They're not quite sure who they are. So that value setting thing, as they bring in tools which can sort of do a lot of these things for them, has become a really key part. So you're right, you know, having those filters in and the human side of it is so important. So thank you, Sarah, for sharing that. Anything else on Harry you want to touch on at all?
No, I think we picked up all the 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 main points there, really. But yeah, I suppose actually I'll just pick up on the last point, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I'm sure that's a saying we're all familiar with, but interesting. You know, it's standing the test of time, we believe that, you know, you've got to, it's about how you are with people, how you are as people, how you know, how you behave as a business as well as individuals. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think some of the bits I do with sort of therapy clients come into this as well. We often build in this ability to be flexible psychologically. So we can deal with things coming into us, but from both a personal point of view, I think with AI, but also from businesses, our ability to adapt is going to be so key to all of this. And I read a phrase recently which says something about it's not about efficiency anymore, it's about empathy at scale. So efficiency is really important, but actually scaling our empathy, understanding what that looks like, who we are, what we stand for in our business and in our lives is a really key thing. And with all of these, it's going back to what we said at the very beginning of this. You know, you're not alone. We're all still figuring this out. There will be changes happening all the time, not trying to be perfect with it, but also leaning into the things which make us us, those human skills. So we can be curious, we can have empathy, we can adapt. And there's so much research showing that there's never been a greater need excuse me, for all of these things, those really human skills are being shown to be so valuable, possibly more than they ever have been before. So leaning into those things is key. And I saw this sort of Rubik's Cube type thing earlier on. And it just said figure it out. So it was quite a tough message, but I thought if we add the together we can, I think it's all about kind of coming together, people sharing things who have different experiences from different backgrounds, different points of view, and actually as a team we work out what we can do with all of this. What are your thoughts, Ali, on that?
Yeah, the thing that's come to my mind, we've mentioned training, and obviously the Thrive team can support with various types of training, but coaching as well. For individuals to, if they are trying to figure things out, how powerful coaching can be. And I know we've got some other coaches on the call as well. So, yeah, I think what we've sort of established is a huge topic, and we're only just sort of skimming the surface here. But I think what's come through as a message throughout every aspect of the conversation is that human element, that empathy, that human connection, social connection, and how important it is, and we sort of can't lose that, really. That's what we all need as human beings. But I wonder, I know we had a question submitted when I registered, and it was what ethical considerations are there for increasingly using AI in industries and areas like HR? So it's probably just worth spending I think we've covered, quite a few of that throughout the session, but it's probably worth just exploring that a little bit more. So I think from the things that we've already talked about are, it's about having those boundaries, perhaps even policies or filters within your business. So I think it's about being clear what AI is to be used for, and having quite strict IT, GDPR policies that surround that. But it's probably also recognizing people are going to use it whether you know they're using it or want them to use it. So, it's about communicating as well. And, we've picked up some of the, lots of the good points around AI, but also some of the potential negatives that there are. And, part of our business is around recruitment, selection, headhunting. And if we used AI for all of that, we'd probably be delivering candidates that are robotic to our clients, and that's not what they're after. So whilst we use AI to perhaps help us find candidates, that human touch comes from that initial connection, where you're interested in having a conversation. Then it's about having quite a deep and personal conversation about what they're looking for in a role, and exploring the role that is available and how they might fit with that. And it's also about how might they fit within the team, the business that they are going to. What are their personal circumstances? Are they ready for a move? Is their family ready for them to move, etc.? And, I don't believe AI is anywhere near doing that yet. I guess that goes a bit back to Vanessa's example around the mental health, the suicide question with AI, and what Sarah was saying. There's no moral compass in AI. You need that empathy. You need to be able to read between the lines. So, there are concerns around using AI, particularly within recruitment, and that's around the sort of bias and fairness. I think that's probably been sort of quite widely discussed in sort of newspaper articles, etc. So, things like accountability. So, who in your business is accountable for I guess setting the tone of how AI is used, but what about when AI is used wrongly, and there's an impact on an individual, the business, a client, customer, whatever. Have you thought about that? How is that going to be remedied? There's the potential to dehumanize the workplace. We've talked a lot about that. So, how do you account for that? That social connection and keep that, and some of those rituals, check-ins, all the good management practice that we know, all of those good things that we really developed within during the pandemic, but we should take forward. And I guess we should also be thinking about what is this going to do to the workforce? I've already shared that sort of headline about entry-level jobs being reduced by a third due to ChatGPT. So how are we going to skill up our young people entering the workforce, but keep everybody at whatever age stage in your career skilled and ready for the next thing, so we don't lose those really important skills around being human. And then I guess there's that sort of global impact on AI as well. What does that do to us as human beings, as a species? So that there's lots of ethics to consider, and I don't have the answer to it. My brain is definitely not the right sort to work all of those out. But I guess awareness is key. So by asking, or I think all we can do at the moment is those small steps, and that's around asking the questions. So it's about keeping the conversation going. But if you've got anything more to add to that, then it'd be great to hear if anything's come to forefront for you.
Ali, just the comment, I wrote it in the chat because I didn't want to forget while I was listening to you there. But I think in terms of ethics, one of the things actually from more like an HR background, I think when I first came across it, one of my favourite phrases is just because we can doesn't mean we should.
Yeah.
And I think that's really relevant for AI, that it's there for us to use in all walks of life. But it doesn't mean it's always going to be the appropriate thing to do. And again, that's where our judgment and moral compass comes in, isn't it? So
yeah,
I think that's a good
definitely.
guide.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, I think, Tom,
I think
anything
so.
more to
Yeah, I would
say?
say I need to remember also about where AI comes from. And it's mentioned bias. People are creating these, and we've seen, if you have a look at the Elon Musk story behind how his AI is being created, there are people putting biases into things as well. So just being aware that all these models, I often get them arguing between each other, and they all have different preferences on things. So I think sometimes we default to, well, AI won't have biases. It does. So we think about where they come from too. So it's again being really aware, having eyes very much open about things. It's really important. But I've loved the interaction from people today. It's really lovely to see people thinking about this, engaging with it, sharing examples, being really aware about what's going on and very intentional in how they're using it. I think if we've got people using those skills, it bodes very well for the future, hopefully, as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Vanessa, you're not on mute. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it was really interesting, Ali, when you were talking about the whole COVID and lockdown and how we all had to, adjust and be creative and how we were going to keep that human connection. And I hadn't thought of that before. And I think that's really relevant. So if a company is introducing AI and talking about it and getting feedback from people, so people aren't embarrassed or feeling like they don't want to put the hand up to say, look, I don't use it, but I need to know how, and all of those things, then the more that happens, the communication, then I think it will feel so much more inclusive, and maybe looking at how, if something's becoming a lot more efficient, how does a company almost kind of reward the human side of it, like, well, we've finished that task much quicker this month, why don't we all go and do something nice together? And which was a bit like the lockdown, wasn't it? It was like the Friday afternoon drink or quiz or so I think if businesses can take that approach, then people were less likely to be left behind.
Thanks, Vanessa. I'm really conscious of time, and thank you everyone for your engagement. So we hope you found the session valuable and insightful. If you'd like to continue the conversation, explore the resources, or get involved with our upcoming events, then please connect with us on LinkedIn. You can check out our website, www.thethriveteam.co.uk. We will send out a recording to everyone that's registered, so you can expect to receive that as soon as it's done its bit and we've sorted out the technology. And thank you everyone for your engagement, and thank you to Tom for an excellent job on your presentation today. And it's been great to see everyone. So have a good rest of the day, enjoy the sunshine, and see you all again soon. Thank you.
You.